share this later. So thank you everyone for joining us for our standing monthly pyramid practice lunch and learn webinar series for Connecticut. And it's lovely to have this expand beyond Connecticut based on some of you that have joined. Today we're going to be talking about the theme of routines and in pyramid language, thinking about them being predictable, positive, and connected. So I'm sorry, I said routines, transitions, which routines will be fit into this as well. But really focusing on traditions both thematically during this time of year as things are changing with respect to seasons and schedules and some of the places or rooms and buildings that kids will be, and also um, the sort of micro transitions between activities that occur that can be stressful for educators and parents and families. And so there's a great number of pyramid strategies that we'll talk about with respect to this theme today. Want to acknowledge, as we always do, that all of our work within the state of Connecticut to support pyramid model is done by our team, the Parent, Infant, Early Childhood team within the Innovations Institute at UConn School of Social Work, in partnership with the Connecticut Pyramid Model State Leadership Team, and funded by the Office of Early Childhood. If you haven't joined us for previous webinars or other pyramid model offerings in the state, this is just a quick photo of those of us that make up the peak team. So I'm the one already talking, featured at the top on the left. I'm a clinical social worker by training and have used pyramid throughout much of my career in early childhood. You'll be joined by Rachel Vanetta, who will chime in and speak in just a minute or two as well. And Liz Chambers and Liz Hoy are also here. And then, nothing pyramid is done without data. So Margot Candelaria and a team of researchers support all of the evaluation at both the state and site-specific level for pyramid. A few of you already have, but would love to invite you to just chime in the chat with the name, your name, where you work, the range age or sort of age of kids that you work with. And then when you think about the topic of transitions, what's one transition that feels most challenging within your setting or time with kids? So we'll give folks a few minutes to do that. And Rachel, if anything is popping up in the chat already, I'd love for you to narrate that.
For sure. Elise, thanks for getting us started. Oh, sorry. As soon as I started reading, it jumps. Here in North Carolina, a lot of our schools are getting ready to be out for summer. Yeah, so end of school transition for sure. Jen, new teachers in the classroom is most challenging right now. Let's see, Cindy. Typically see transitions from cleanup and lunch and nap being the biggest thing that teachers struggle with. Yeah, absolutely. Alexis mentioned struggle with the transition from lunch to nap time. Yeah, so that sounds familiar and like a bit of a theme. Lorraine, from cleanup to getting outside. Amanda and Trisha, to and from the playground. Yeah, I feel like that comes up a lot, especially maybe trying to get back inside or trying to get off of the playground. I see another, Jessica mentioned lunchtime transition to nap. Yeah, absolutely. So that again sounds like that's a big one that can be difficult. Let's see, one transition we struggle with is bringing children who have shared placement. Oh, okay, yeah, half day with public school, special ed, and then half day with us, come off the bus and join our classroom right around the end of lunchtime, beginning of nap. I think it makes a lot of sense that is a difficult transition.
That's very hard.
Very hard. Yeah. Jaya mentioned a hard time transitioning from outside back inside for sure. from break back to class for Lori. Let's see, arrival and separation into the classroom setting. Yeah, for sure. That can be
Mm,
a tough transition, right? That drop off.
mm,
For sure. Let's
yeah.
see. Yvette transition from playground to classroom and also lunch to nap time. Yeah, so I feel like that's those two sound like really familiar for folks that
Hmm.
getting from the playground back inside or vice versa and getting from lunchtime to nap time. Thank you all so much for sharing those. I hope that it doesn't fix it, but I hope that maybe there's a sense of sort of community in that you're not in it alone, that those times can be really difficult. Hopefully, some of the things that we'll talk about today might be helpful in addressing those.
Yeah. And as you were reading those out loud, Rachel, it made me think of, in any sort of group-based care, right? Like you're not only dealing with the transition for an individual child, but the range of sort of temperament and like slow to warm versus easy to adapt in a large group of kids. And so, I'm just sort of picturing the call in from the playground being easy for some and hard for others, and how do you as an educator manage that? So yeah, with all those things in mind, that's part of why we thought of all the pyramid mid topics, and again, especially given this time of year, it made sense to dedicate an hour to transitions. And those are, frequently brought up in every part of early learning or early childhood, as something that feels challenging for adults and for children alike. So our goal is to explore practices that adults can control to promote predictable, supportive, and engaging transitions across routines and settings. As much as we can kind of plan and have sort of strategies and predictions around transitions based on what we've learned from the day before, or sort of patterns of behavior that help you as the adult in charge make them as smooth as possible. And that we hope that you learn practical strategies to reduce challenging behavior, increase engagement, and support social emotional competence during transitions throughout the day for kids. That same thing sort of said in objective form. We hope that you walk away from this hour with the ability to kind of explain how predictable and responsive transition practices support children to be successful within those given moments and are keys to their social and emotional development and behavior. That you walk away with some sort of key pyramid model strategies that help children feel connected, prepared, and engaged during transitions. And so much of those strategies, right, are, how do we help them feel prepared, that the transition feels predictable? We'll talk about all of those things. Using, practical support. So this is where a lot of the visuals of pyramid come into play. And what are the best ways to kind of introduce those and use those both in wide formats and also individually for kids that need it. Really focus, as anything within Pyramid would, around the role of relationships and inclusive practices to support children with diverse developmental, sensory, language, and behavioral needs during transitions. And then to leave with the intention of reflecting on an opportunity to take at least one thing that we've discussed within this hour back to your work with children and families in the next little bit of time. So we hope that you walk away with, again, some idea about concrete support to help children with transitions. I think, as Rachel noted, we all agree from the comments in the chat that transitions are hard, so we're there already. And hopefully it feels like they're a little bit more within your locus of control rather than responding to the chaos at the end. We've said it already a bit, a little bit of in a bit of the framing of this hour, but wanted to just say it's explicitly here that, we're in a time frame where a lot of the strategies are going to be about the practical transitions between activity to activity, or, task to task that come up. But we're also in a frame of the year when there's, movements to new classrooms for kids, summer breaks, summer camps, maybe new teachers, et cetera. A new school year is sort of shortly around the corner. And those can be things that kids are both excited about, but also need support in navigating. And we do as well as adults. And so a lot of the strategies are going to be the same, whether it's a big transition or a small transition. But, wanting to, remind us all to kind of think about both of those contexts as we're talking about these strategies in the next little bit of time. And we're going to sort of start with the framework of pyramid. If anyone has joined us for the first time today and is using this as an opportunity to kind of learn a little bit more about the model, pyramid is a public health approach, a multi-tiered approach to support and promote social emotional competence for infants and young children, starting first with the base of an effective workforce, meaning a workforce that is trained and supported and having, reflective leadership and supervision to kind of apply all of these strategies, as well as, the time in their day to meet their own needs and including, feed themselves and take a moment to rest, knowing how important they are for tier one, which is focusing on how the environment is set up in relationships, and then moving into targeted social emotional supports and intensive interventions later. The sort of very one line explanation of pyramid is that we don't start at the top, but we really think about the universal practices that all children need to grow and be successful in group care and group learning environments. Um, that again, a little bit of framework here before we go into some specifics about transitions, about the model itself. Pyramid model rests on the foundation of inclusivity, cultural responsivity, anti-racist and anti-bias practices, and that's woven throughout not only thinking about the individualized interventions, but all tiers of this work. That we really believe that social and emotional development is foundational for all other domains of development. The sort of unwritten language there is like the academic skills will come if and when the child's ability to navigate with peers, to understand the behavior expectations of an environment, and to regulate themselves are on board first. And so the importance of starting there. That children need to be taught these skills the same way that we teach anything else. That behavior is communication. So how do we see behavior in the moment, even if it's not ideal or feels harmful to us as adults or to another child, as communicating a need and understand what that child needs in the moment. And that all of these practices are really focused on adult behavior. So everything that we say about transitions today are going to be things that adults can do differently, but hopefully support children to feel more assured and regulated and supported during transitions. But we're not going to say kids should do this instead. It's really all adult behavior. And when we think about transitions, you could think about applying them in really all tiers of the pyramid, but in practice, we're really thinking right now about the universal things that need to be in place first. And that any strategy that you would be pulling from the sort of universal tier one approach has to first be taught that way. You can't, first use it in an individualized intervention if it hasn't been taught and sort of explained in the environment and throughout the group setting. So within tier one and within the category of high quality supportive environments, what we're thinking in sort of the pyramid lens is the things you see there here, and all of these things actually really play into a successful transition. So it names transitions specifically there in the middle, but transitions are dependent on schedules that are not only shared at the beginning but adhered to, right? Routines that are predictable, and routines are kind of support like micro transitions within going from activity to activity. Engagement, so, giving instructions or guidance or seeing when there's disengagement and needing to adjust further or transition earlier can often be key. And then rules and expectations. So what are the rules for this particular transition? If I'm asked to wait in line, how am I able to lie on the floor? Is that technically waiting in line? Or, what are the expectations of me as a member of this classroom during this transition? So with that in mind, thinking about transitions, yes, as a time that can be stressful for us as the adults, but really as an opportunity, that they're not sort of in between moments, but they're, if we think about them instead as teachable moments and ways to use teaching strategies, it again puts a lot of the locus of control of a transition back into our hands, at least a little bit, right? And that strong transition practices really, really do reduce challenging behavior and increasing engagement. And that if we think about it with a pyramid model emphasis, and the idea of predictable environments, supportive relationships, explicit teaching, and prevention-focused practices, all those things when put into place, or when you can see those things happening within a classroom setting, that often go to supporting transitions to be more successful. Um, so we've said this already, but sometimes when when adults or when transitions feel more difficult, it's often because adults did the things you see here. So they gave a lot of verbal directions all at once, right? Sometimes, in a given setting, whether it be individual or group based, kids can get like 3, 4, 5 step instructions in one sort of breath from an adult. And maybe they're holding on to the thing that was said last, right? So how do we kind of give verbal prompts in ways that are paced to the developmental and chronological age of the kids that we're asking for? When kids feel rushed, that feels chaotic, and they can, again, their thinking or learning brain flips off, and that's when you get sort of more of an emotional or sort of physiological reaction, which in most small kids looks like a tantrum. Relying heavily on correction, so not telling kids what to do, but telling them what not to do. And you see this a lot where kids are told, don't don't touch the person in front of you, don't move, like, don't put your coat on yet, don't. But they're not told what they could do, and so they're left kind of in a little bit of a fight or flight like a response because they get that the adult is telling them that they've done something that they shouldn't be doing, and kids have responses to that. But also, like, what's the next? Okay, how do I then engage in this activity in a way that would work? Um, and so again, we've sort of unintentionally created an opportunity for misconnection and for an upset kid, which can lead to challenging behavior. And then unintentionally long wait times. And there are parts of transitions. When you guys were talking about going out to the playground or coming back in from the playground, moving from lunch to nap time, often that only has to do with, are they finishing the meal at the same time? Are they then doing whatever sort of cleanup, hand wiping? Usually there's like a bathroom transition in between that. And depending on the developmental need of those kids, that their ability to pace that can be very different than their peers. And so the idea of sort of how do we manage wait times can often be something that once you have a trial and error and see what works for the group of kids that you're working with, can really, free up some tension during transitions for sure. Um, and then so with those things in mind, so if we see transitions where adults are doing these things, so they're rushing kids, they're only correcting them, not telling them what to do, there's long wait times, there's a lot of verbal instructions given all at once, then we see kids that have difficulty because we've asked them to stop their preferred activity. They're waiting a long time. They're uncertain about what comes next or how long they have to wait here or whatever it might be. There's some sensory demands often with respect to kids, and Pyramid helps us think not only about the kids that come in with an IEP or an IFSP that says this child has sensory needs, but every child has a sensory profile, and so there might be a kid that is just more sensitive to the tag on their coat that they're putting on for outdoor play in the fall or that type of thing. Language processing. So how clear are they on the instructions that were given and their own ability to regulate that sort of process within their own emotions and task. And so that's when we see sort of the child response to the adult setup lead to increasing challenging behavior, increased disengagement, increased peer conflict, and then adult stress to all those things. Um, and so, with that in mind, we wanted to pivot to show you a brief clip from this video. This is a teacher on YouTube, and I apologize. I tried to edit it so that I could re-embed it within the slides. I tried my best, but I wasn't able to do that. So I'm going to pivot off screen and pull this up for you, and just show a minute or two where she's talking. You can see she's clearly a director, just by the few sort of cues in the screen here, but talking about how this is applied within the classrooms that she's been in. So I will pivot now to that. Oops. Okay. Okay, so if I start it right at 1 minute, and you guys should, I've done all the things to ensure that you can hear the audio, but let me know if you don't.
They will find something to do. One year we were scrambling around because we didn't plan a transition from art to music, which another teacher came in to teach. And it was pretty chaotic because we had to clean up the kids and then have them settle down to go to the rug. And plus, it took a lot of time away from that teacher's teaching time. And here's the secret that most new teachers miss. The key to smooth transitions is planning them like you would any other part of the day. Transitions aren't just dead time, they can be teaching opportunities. And if you build them on purpose, the whole day will run smoother. So it's simple. Don't just let transitions happen, plan them. I'm not talking about planning a two-page transition plan like you would a lesson plan, but just know what you will be doing or what you'll use during them. So you build them into your day with short, structured activities that will bridge the larger pieces of your day together. So one year we had a specialist teacher that would come in and she would meet the children on the rug, and then if she had something planned that she wanted to do at the tables, she would just say, all right, let's go to the tables. And it would be a huge mess because the kids would find every which way to get there, regardless of safety or any expectation. So instead, doing something like singing a song with their name or even playing a quick game could have made that transition so much more smoother and safer. Tiny tweaks.
I just love the way that she talks about it with sort of teacher language about fitting this in with what you're planning. And so I'm going to let Rachel take on the rest of the slides.
Thanks, Kate. Let's
Hmm.
see here.
I'll pull them up right now. Oh, you got it? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think that we have established in a number of ways that the transitions can be tricky, right? It can be tricky for adults, tricky for kids. And what often happens, I think, when that occurs for teachers is then there's like some dysregulation that can occur, and that just makes everything harder, right? Like when we're having a hard time sort of staying regulated and in the moment and able to sort of be a problem solver at that time, it just makes everything more difficult. So we're going to talk about a handful of ways that will hopefully be helpful as either you're thinking about transitions, or I know when I was looking through the chat at some of the comments, I know that we have a handful of directors in here also. And so if you're a director or someone else who supports teachers, maybe some things that you can sort of suggest to teachers if they're struggling with their transitions. So we're going to talk about predictability, positive relationships, active engagement, and teaching expectations. When we think about predictability, it's really like, and Kate mentioned routines earlier. I think about some of this going kind of hand in hand, where it's sort of like the routine of the transition feels similar day to day, right? Or children are really consistently able to know what that transition is going to be like. And so things like using transition warnings and using them consistently, or using countdowns and including visual countdowns, right? So, like if you say 2 minutes to a 2-year-old, that usually doesn't mean much. But if you're able to have a visual timer, a visual countdown, that is much easier for a young child to sort of conceptualize what that means. And using consistent cues. And so again, where it's like we want to sort of get to a place where children, when they sort of hear the transition warning, or see a timer or hear or see a certain cue, they know that that transition is coming. And that just helps them to sort of prepare for it and engage with it more effectively. Sometimes I like to think about how things impact us as adults as we think about what we're doing for children. And it's like if you were doing, so imagine if you're, really engaged in something that you love to do. You're doing art that you're interested in or reading a really good book. And someone just said, you have to put it away now. Like that would be a bummer, right? And so having some kind of warning and an ability to sort of know that that transition or change is happening, you might still want to read the book, but at least you sort of have a sense of, okay, I just have a couple of minutes to sort of wrap this up, and then I need to think about what's coming next. NCPMI has some transition visual cards that we'll put a link to in the chat, including whole group warning cues, transition songs and games, teaching transition expectations, using positive descriptive feedback, and individualized transition supports. So as we go through, we'll talk about some of these different resources and include those in the chat so that you can take a look at those. The next strategy is really attending to positive relationships. And so if you remember way back from the very beginning, when we talk about the tiers of the pyramid, tier one includes both nurturing and responsive relationships and high quality supportive environments. And transitions are a part of this environmental piece. That said, a way that we often talk about some of these things related to the environment is that they all happen within the context of a relationship. And so if you could have like beautiful transition warnings or cues, or you could be sort of teaching things around transitions, but also those things won't be effective without being sort of relationship based. And so, I really encourage you to think about both sort of relationships globally, but also really specifically within the context of the transition, really kind of attending to some relational ways of being. And so things like, working on connecting with a child before sort of correcting if there's a correction that needs to be made with regard to how they're engaging in the transition. Looking for ways for children who need individualized support, finding ways to offer that to them. Using some co-regulation. And so again, I was saying earlier, like when these things can get stressful, sometimes what happens is the teacher gets dysregulated and then it's really hard. Young children are still working on their capacity to regulate. And often what they need is the adult in the room to be regulated, and they can sort of borrow from that adult's regulation. And so for those of you who are teachers, or again, if you're supporting teachers, really encouraging, I think, just awareness about if this becomes stressful, what are some ways that I can make sure that I sort of calm myself before I try to address a concern? And acknowledging emotions around transitions. And so you can say things like, you weren't ready to stop building. Let's save your work. Or I'll help you move to the next activity, right? That's really relational. It's not like I demand you go to the next thing, but I'm going to help you with this. I think certainly, acknowledging that someone doesn't want to stop what they're doing, and what that can feel like. Oh, I know it can be hard or frustrating or upsetting, to have to stop something that you really love to do. I get that. So the validation isn't just automatically going to take away that the child's upset that they're moving from their preferred activity to something else. But it's helpful, and it's a relational strategy. The next piece is really thinking about active engagement. And so how can children sort of be doing something while they're transitioning? So things like movement-based transitions. I remember I was in a classroom with a child who really liked to be a dinosaur, and transitions were hard for that child. And one of the things that that the teachers identified was having the child sort of be a dinosaur in their transition And that really worked for him. So thinking about, in what ways can movement be part of the transition? Having helpers or having jobs, children who are doing things to help the class kind of get from one thing to the next. Using songs or chants, that's another way of engaging children. And Kate was talking about this earlier, but really trying to avoid long wait times. And so if children are transitioning from one thing to the next, and again, as Kate was talking about earlier, like that doesn't always happen at exactly sort of the same rate. And so when children are getting to that next thing, is there something that they can do rather than just sort of sitting there waiting? I remember I guess I was talking to an administrator who was talking about, working with their teachers, and they said, it was transition, I think, from lunch or from maybe snack to the carpet. And they were asking children to move to the carpet after snack time, but to essentially like sit there and wait until circle time began. And she was like, they wait for about 30 seconds and then they want to do something. And that makes sense. And the teacher was really trying to get them to sort of like not get any materials out, but to just like sit and wait on the carpet. And that just doesn't work. And so really, finding ways for children to be able to be engaged if there is a period of wait before the next kind of like coordinated activity, they need to have something to do while they're waiting. So would love to hear from the group about strategies that you use. And so do you use visual cues? Do you use songs or timers? Do you like using movement things or having jobs or helpers? And we have a poll that you can complete. And again, would love to just see what folks are doing. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second.
I often think of this, Rachel, like just like ice cream, like two flavors are often better than one alone. So often it's, like sometimes you might use a visual and a song together or
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, apologize for my voice, that my favorite is the movement activities, incorporating movement, but also like I have the cards. I put the transition movement cards in the chat. Um, Doing that with a transition helper. So somebody that, has a challenge at transitions, but they get to pick which movement to do. That was always super helpful for me.
Shakita in the chat says, I've seen toddler teachers use walking ropes for the transition to and from the playground. That's a really nice way to sort of, in using a movement-based strategy, just like Liz was just saying, but get kids to naturally leave their sort of individual activities on the playground and get in the line for a walking rope too. Elise says transition games are fun and engaging. When I used creative curriculum, they had mighty minutes that I could pull and use. That's great.
Yeah, so would love to appreciate Elise and Shakita putting those in the chat. If anyone else has sort of a creative idea or something that you really like to use that you want to put in the chat, this is a great place for all of us to learn from each other. Thanks, Nisha. Movement, rhythm, pacing all together. Yeah, that reminds me of sort of what Kate was saying. Two's better than one. Three might be more effective than two, right? Sometimes we have to pull several things together to sort of make it work. So thank you for sharing that. It looks like, oh yes, and Shakita, I Spy, the ants go marching. Absolutely. I Spy, I would say, is like a real default in my house
Mhm.
for all things. All things related to transitions or like needing to be sort of patient. I Spy is a good
Definitely.
go-to. Yeah, thanks so much. Awesome. So it looks like just from the poll, it looks like a lot of folks use songs and timers. Those were sort of the most identified, and then visuals and movement. And then one person noted jobs or helpers and one noted other. So thank you for sharing that. And again, if ideas pop up, please don't hesitate to share those in the chat. Okay. All right. The next sort of category of things that we're going to talk about is teaching expectations. And again, this comes up in a number of different places as it pertains to pyramid model, but again, really thinking about this specifically as we think about helping to support children transition. And so want to consider some different sort of strategies around modeling, sort of like what this transition is going to look like, or what the routine to support the transition looks like, practicing the transition. So sometimes it's really interesting to me that when you set up something as like, we're going to practice doing this, it has a different feel to it than like when you're actually doing it. I think that's so interesting, but offers a lot of opportunity for children to kind of get used to it, and in an environment that I think often feels kind of less stressed. So like when you're practicing the transition, it feels less stressful than when the transition actually comes up. So setting it up as a practice can be a really helpful way to kind of like, the way I think about it is getting some reps in for children before it's actually time to do that thing. And then really reinforcing success, or reinforcing when children are doing what it is that's asked of them. And so again, that reinforcement or positive praise or sort of highlighting the good, again, that's something that comes up a lot in pyramid model work. But here, again, really thinking specifically about when you're doing a transition and when you're seeing children do whatever it is that you're asking them to do, really taking a moment to reinforce that. And so I encourage, like, if you want to think about, for example, because cleanup can be a difficult time, or for those of you who identified like the transition from lunch to nap, or inside to outside, or outside to inside, think about what would that look like? Like, what would a successful transition for you in that period look like? And consider, what would that look like? What does that sound like? And what would it feel like? And maybe what would it feel like for you as the adult? And what do you want that to feel like for children? And doing that, I think, will help I loved that part of the video when she was talking about, really like planning and structuring your transition like you plan another part of your day. This can help kind of get to that place where it helps you to plan out, what is it that I need to do to help it look like and sound like and feel like what it is that I want it to. A few more sort of pieces around some strategies, really using some scripted stories. And so we'll put the scripted stories resources in the chat as well from NCPMI if you would like to use those. Scripted stories can really help children to understand what the expectations are. It's a little bit like a kind of like a cognitive rehearsal before a physical rehearsal. So you sort of see and hear what's happening in the story, and then you have an opportunity to do it yourself. It can be really helpful when children experience some anxiety or some challenges around transitions. And the scripted stories can be particularly supportive for children who, really need that sort of strong sense of predictability, for them to, kind of follow the story sort of behaviorally, or follow what they've learned from the story behaviorally after they've listened to it and kind of understood it cognitively, can be really helpful for children. And so I think a place where I know that I have certainly had some misses before historically, and I think we see in conversation with teachers, is feeling like if we teach it once or twice, or like model it once or twice, then that's it. We've done it. And children know then what it is that we're doing. And so really just reinforcing the idea that it requires a lot of teaching. It requires modeling, it requires opportunities for children to practice. For a lot of children, it might require some visual reminders and some reinforcement when they're doing, again, when they're doing what we ask. And that takes just a lot of repetition. I think also something that we see sometimes is this is really emphasized at kind of like the beginning of the school year, or like August, September. And then as things move along, we sort of forget that we need to continue to emphasize the steps. But children need that. And um, we just have to sort of do it over and over again and anticipate that, right? I think that can be the other piece for the adult is like expect that it's going to take a lot of teaching and a lot of reinforcement for children to integrate it. A couple of thoughts on supporting and teaching and individualized needs during transitions. And so really making sure that we're being inclusive and supportive of all children who are in the environment. One is visual cues, and that might be individual visual cues, right? So you might have some classroom visual cues, but individual children might also need some of their own individual visual cues to support them. A transition object might be something else that could be really supportive, or sensory supports. Kate was talking earlier about all children have different sensory needs. Some children might need some particular sensory supports to help them get through a transition. Peer buddies can be a helpful way of getting through transitions. Again, that kind of goes back to having jobs or buddies. We were talking about that earlier. Having some simplified directions. Again, I think this is something that we have to really be careful about at all times, giving 47-step directions. But we might, even if we've, sort of identified some shorter or more bite-sized directions along individualized support, we might need some simplified directions and instructions, using social stories for a particular child and embedding choices. Do you want to do it this way or that? As a reminder, I think it's always a good reminder. Children have so few choices throughout the day. Most of the things in their day they have no control over. And so the more that we can find places to embed choices, the better it's going to feel for them. And that really helps to support positive behavior. From an equity and cultural responsiveness perspective, really just want to consider that families will have different expectations and needs around their routines and their transitions, and wanting to honor that and learn more about that. We talk about family partnership a lot in Pyramid Model. And so really this is a great place to just get some more information from families about what this looks like in their homes and what feels meaningful and important to them. Understanding that communication styles can be quite different. And I think an easy example of this is thinking about, for example, eye contact. We don't, as the teacher, we don't need to demand eye contact from a child to ensure that they are listening. For some children, that's a sign of disrespect. And so we don't, that's not something, for example, that we need to ask for or look for. Considering relationship-centered approaches, and again, really wanting to ensure that that relational piece is part of the transition activity, and honoring home language and cultural practices. And so we talk a good bit about when children speak languages that are not English at home, trying to learn some of those key words and phrases to help support and honor children's home languages. And then again, really sort of thinking about and extending this into family partnership and family engagement, talking with families about transition strategies. And someone mentioned in the chat that drop off, right, can be difficult, that separation can be really difficult. And so talking with families about strategies for drop off and pickup and what feels important to them and acknowledging and honoring the ways in which they would like to say goodbye and separate from their child for the day. Trying to support consistency across home and school where possible, right? This is not necessarily always going to be exactly the same, but we know that when the same kind of strategies are used at home and in the classroom, there's just faster acquisition. It becomes more routine faster for the child. And so, again, talking with families about what you're doing and getting feedback about how that's working and what works for them, and inviting family input and getting their feedback about what works for them. For example, again, thinking about maybe a special goodbye that will support predictability for children when they're separating, if that's a difficult transition for a child. So again, both trying to provide information to families about what you're doing in the classroom to support transitions and also getting that bidirectional feedback where you're also getting information from families about what works for them, what's important to them. You know, again, if, for example, drop off is a difficult separation, how you all can partner to manage that effectively together. Here are just a number of other transition resources from NCPMI, and we will put all of those in the chat so that you can access those as well. And if nothing else, hopefully the takeaway is that we all do better when the transitions are predictable and they're relationship based, when children can be engaged, and when there's some intentional teaching around them. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen in just a minute and would love to take a moment for you to think about one thing, maybe one strategy or one like category that you would like to give a try as you think about either transitions in your classroom or if you're supporting teachers, something that you might encourage them to try. So we'll give you a moment to think about it, and then would love to, if anyone wants to add something in the chat, we'd love to hear something that you're walking away with. Thanks, Liz, for putting all those in the chat. Elise, thanks so much. Glad to have quick access to first then cards to pass on to educators. Great. Thank you. Skylar, I love the transition activity cards. I think they are a great resource to share with teachers I coach as a tool to keep in their tool belt. Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Skylar. Nisha, making the time to be intentional. Yeah, teaming, communication, and collaboration. Yeah, absolutely. I think that piece, making the time to be intentional, is huge. Even just that can be really helpful. Let's take a moment and think about what we're doing and kind of have a strategy behind it. Cindy, I really like the idea of teachers thinking about the smaller expectations of what they would like to see children actually doing during the transition times. Yeah, if they don't know what they want kids to be doing, how do the kids know what they are supposed to be doing? Good cue. Good cue, Cindy. Absolutely. That's right. Yvette, the cards are an awesome resource, preparing the kids, yeah, and practicing transitions. That's great. Thank you.
I think the thing that's so nice about the cards that a couple of you pointed out is that it's really for the adults. It reminds you as an adult to kind of use them and sort of walk kids through that strategy. Yeah, again, like it's helpful to help the adult structure the activity.
Robin, I like the idea of practicing fun way. Awesome. That's great. Thank you all so much for sharing those. So want to just remind you that we do this on a monthly basis. We're here. We're happy to always see you here. We also have a playlist of our past Lunch and Learn recordings. And so we have Setting Up the Classroom, Family Engagement, Reframing Behavior, parts 1 and 2, Family Belonging, and teaching problem solving. And so those are all available through one playlist. You can sort of get to all of them through one playlist. We'll put that link in the chat. Our next pyramid practice webinar will be on Thursday, June 25th from 12 to 1. And we'll be talking about emotional literacy. And then we're also just working on expanding sort of access and offering of this webinar, both to being able to offer these in the evenings and also being able to offer them in Spanish. And so we have the Spanish language evening session of this session. We'll have a date to be able to announce next week, but we also have on Monday, June 1st, already planned Strengthening the Foundation, the case for Tier 1. So if you know of anyone who, it's tough, we understand it can be tough to get away in the middle of the day. And so if an evening opportunity is better, that will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're always happy to hear from you. If you have any questions or comments or want to connect, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at peak@uconn.edu, or even if it's just a resource request or can you help me find something, we always would love to do that. So really appreciate everyone joining us today. Team, I don't know if there's anything else that I have forgotten before we wrap up for today. We're 4 minutes. We're like right at time. This is about the best we've done time-wise, I think. Okay. All right, we'll hang out for a minute if anyone has any questions or concerns. Otherwise, thank you all so much for joining us. Hope you have a great afternoon, and we will hopefully see some of you all in June.
Hi, Robin and Shakita.
I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute. Good to see you too, Liz.
Hope you're doing well.
I am. Thank you.